Hello, hello.
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 We're waiting on everybody to show up. Marina, good job on the signing on the CNCF stuff this past week.
Oh, thanks.
Looked like quite a involved project of a lot of scripts to run.
Yeah. Yeah, Azure did a really good job making them easy to do. But yeah, it was a process.
I'm still sorting out, seeing some of the stuff on Cosign, and I need to dig into that one and see how they're integrating the tough side of that into what they're doing over there.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a work in progress, but there's some cool stuff happening.
So day one, get the root keys. Day two, figure out how to use them.
Something like that.
Hi, Brandon. I'm Marina. Locking joined us today. Hi, everyone else.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Do we think we're going to have Steve today?
Steve's still out
Steve
on
is
vacation.
Vacation, I think. Yeah.
Oh, is he? Okay.
He'll be back Monday next week.
Well, that might kill my first topic.
Yeah, I think that the only two people who can currently fix the first topic are Steve and Justin Cormack. So
Yeah.
Yeah. And I spoke to Serge after he met on Tuesday, I believe. I met with him on Tuesday and he mentioned this topic. So I was going to suggest some things if we want to go over that topic still. I can certainly help drive it forward with Steve once he's back on Monday.
Okay.
sure.
I think we should talk about it. We discussed a bit about it on AWS side too. And we feel we should make progress on this topic because it's currently blocking few items.
Yeah, I'd like to try to get some of the work going back into the GitHub, and because I think we've got a lot of the HackMD documents running around where I don't think it's as visible, and so everybody's kind of going little separate directions and things are backing up.
So is the goal just to have a larger body of maintainers?
I think the big goal to me is just to make sure
Yeah.
that there is a workflow that gets the stuff into the project and committed and approved. Because right now we get merge requests that'll sit out there indefinitely. There's no certainty of when we're going to get this thing approved, how, or anything else. And so it'd just be nice to see that happen. Whether that means we need more maintainers out there just because, you know, we want to have more people to give the looks good to me on the request, or if something else needs to happen. Just want to see some progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, the way that I've seen it be effective before is just folks can nominate and then the maintainers vote on, and we can put a very loose governance structure document I could even pull some up in this meeting and see if everybody likes those. Just the way, you know, maintainers added and turned to emeritus and a few other bits and bobs, and we could add that to the governance doc. And if everybody's in agreement, we check that in, and then folks can get nominated and added to the maintainers list. And probably just put a code owners. I don't think there's a code owners in there, so that reviews get assigned to folks and that folks have the ability to sign off. So I think in most projects, I've seen at least 2 maintainers need to sign off, and whether you want to lock that down. So how about I run around and find just some different examples of some maintainer docs that are out there from projects that I know about. If you find any that are different, feel free to contribute them, and then we can figure that out. But in the meantime, how about people raise issues asking to be added as maintainers with their GitHub handle, and then the maintainers now, if it's just Justin and Steve, they can start that process immediately while we, you know, get the governance piece in. I think that all makes good sense. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah,
Any other
that's fine.
suggestions? Okay, well, I will, I'll take a look at that this morning and hit you up on Slack with the progress I've made, and then we can, I'll let Steve know on Monday, and I'll also ping Justin.
I think that sounds good. Also, I think few times in the past, we have documents in different states of progress. And I think there has been unwillingness to commit those because they represent a work in progress and not there in the final state. Is there something that we can put in the README that says this is a general notice for the larger community or whoever is reading these docs, that these overall state of this repo is still in progress, and any of the specs or requirements in there are not set in stone? That's what I feel. I want to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, I think if we just make a note in the README that this is all a work in progress, we are design, you know, we're in the process of designing this thing, then we can just merge things kind of as they are and then iterate. Because I think it's really hard to iterate in the PR stage, because if multiple different people have things to add, I just don't think that workflow is
yeah, I think it's difficult to fully resolve, like for the revocation one, that there are going to be deltas, but if you just look at one of them, that's not the complete document. So you won't be able to just push it in that state. All right.
The one other thing I wanted to bring up is the comment I posted in Slack yesterday about making promises to the community about releasing something when we haven't yet agreed to what it is we're even designing. Like, we still haven't agreed on requirements, we still haven't agreed on a threat model. I'm really worried that by promising something, we'll end up releasing something that doesn't actually meet whatever design we actually come up with. Yeah, this is a big concern I want to make sure that we talk about, and maybe make sure that there's some community involvement in making these promises instead of them just coming out.
And some of that, to me, it feels like we've got 2 different directions going on. We've got our meetings that we're doing in the GitHub and then in these weekly discussions here. And then there's a lot of work going on outside of our view. I think there's the consortium from Microsoft. I think it might be like AWS and Docker and a few other people in that group that are working on stuff behind the scenes with their own commitments. And those 2 are not in lockstep. And so I think there's some confusion amongst at least this side of it of what we're agreeing to, what we're working on.
Yeah, I think more generally in open source projects, they work better when we have open communication, and most communication happens where people can see it, just so that like people know what's happening. So I feel like I've definitely been caught off guard a lot of times, even though I'm actively following the project, about stuff that's happening. Yeah.
I think that is valid feedback, something that needs to be discussed with Steve and Justin.
Yep, I'm
And
just taking notes
and,
here in the doc. I'll discuss this with Steve. It's perfectly valid feedback.
Yeah, and I do agree. The state of the project, there's a lot to be done. We don't even have. I think on the requirements, we're probably much further ahead. On the design, there's lots to be done. We don't have consensus on multiple areas, and also on the threat on in this release, what is the set of threats that we are addressing?
Yep. So I think those are kind of the big governance questions that I think several of us had. I did have 2 items lower down the list there for looking for approval on those things, but I guess if we don't have Stephen here, we probably won't make much progress on that. Although, Milind, I did see you jumping on at least one of those, so I don't know if we want to chat about those in here or not.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
we can.
Otherwise, I know
Yeah,
the big
we
one is going to be the signature format discussion. So I was.
So signature format, I don't see much progress on that. I think, so if you open up the document, there's more clarity on how things relate. But structurally, one of my asks was to separate out what goes in the signature and what do we need from a signature format. And I don't see those requirements coming out clearly. Right now, there's a separation between the payload and the signature, which both talk about parts of the signature. There's nothing about the signature format. A separate section would help. Like, for example, a particular signature format, we should have stable implementation in language XYZ. For example, we need Go because the Docker plugins, etc., would be implemented in Go, and in some other language that you'll use to implement the signer or any server-side component. Things like support for TSA, multiple signatures, etc. So I'm looking for clarity there, and that gives us a framework. Then we can use that to evaluate the signature formats being proposed. Whereas right now we are listing out pros and cons for the signature format, but they are not really kind of against the same set of criteria. So I think there's a lot of good feedback in that document from last week. I think we'll still wait on iteration. I think folks should still be free to go through this offline, and you can put in feedback. Let me paste the link again. It's there in the agenda too. And I think one of the parts that is interesting in here is it's not just the signature blob and the format. It's how it interacts with the signature manifest, which in this document, in the diagram, is being called as notary artifact manifest. What attributes go in that? Part of that should also be covered in this document. So that was basically what I wanted to cover. I don't think we need to spend time actively reviewing it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I left off a couple of comments, but I don't think it's mostly similar to what we talked about last week. So I think it's just, yeah, give folks time to work on that. That looks good.
Just pull my screen up here for the other ones that we were chatting about. So bump the font size up for anybody watching at home. So we did have a few comments in here. And so I just kind of wanted to, since we had a chance to go back and forth on this and see, should I make changes to this, or do we think this looks good as is? And I'm fine with either. I just want to make sure I capture what the group wants to see here. So a little bit of feedback on the consumers are pulling the artifact and verifying it. Should indicate that it's no longer trusted. And so the comment in there is, let people read it for themselves. But I think the concern was that if they received the error that they wanted to have it an option as a warning. Is that this one?
I don't have a strong opinion on the UI, but it should be possible to verify a revoked signature anyway for forensic purposes. If my vendor ships a malware and it's correctly signed, I want to be able to come back and say, this is malware because this is the malicious code and this is a signature and it was validly signed by you, and you can't just revoke that and pretend it never happened.
So the question I have here is, where are we defining this spec here? How far do we want to go down that? And when we say what the client is doing, depending on where we define that line, I think that one of the checks is just yes, it's signed, or no, it's not. True, false, and not true, false, and file not found, or some other, third option in there. And then, the process on top of that would say, okay, the notary signature looked at it and said it's not valid. And now here are the options that the user wants to take based off of whether or not it's valid or not valid.
Yeah, I agree that the notary should just say yes or no to clients. But, my concern was that the format should make this possible to write a tool that does the forensic decision. It doesn't necessarily mean that ordinary notary clients should have an option or should have a three-state option, three-state output that almost certainly not. And you might be perfectly right that this is unrelated to the pull request.
Yeah, I think it's just where we define the line. Sorry, I keep cutting you off. Jump in.
No worries. Yeah, my view is different there. Sorry for putting in the feedback late. This was available, I think, since last week, but I made some time today morning. So this is based on, for example, AWS supports signing for Lambda functions, which is the serverless offering, and we have similar verification decisions there, and what the customer controls and error modes, how all of those interact. What I was suggesting was, when you say signature verification fails, there are certain types of failures that if you turned on signature verification, you always want them to be hard failures. So if integrity check fails, you want the signature verification to say this is a hard failure. If you can't parse the signature, it's a hard failure. If the identity of the signature doesn't match with the identity that you expect, it should be a hard failure. There are a few other things that depends on how consumers want to use those and their risk tolerance in those scenarios. So expired signatures, for example, customers of online services, and we have seen outages due to this. Signatures get expired, you didn't rotate either certificates or update your signatures, and you suddenly get an outage one day. We want customers to decide or set policies in those cases. Same for revoked signatures, especially like this, the artifact signature. And we talked about it in the other doc, where I've given justification on why consumers need to be in control of how they react to failures. In that document, I defined, I think, two ends of that spectrum, where we have a customer that has a very high security bar, and they always want things to fail in all of these conditions, including revocation. And on the other end is somebody who's running an online service, and they don't want revocation to cause failures. And like an example of this is like and this is like example from within AWS ecosystem itself. So our packages that we consume, the package publisher inside our ecosystem, internal ecosystem, can indicate that the package is deprecated or revoked for some reason. And the consumers get a choice they basically get a warning and a choice of whether they want to upgrade, or they handle it based on how they see fit. And how most teams that deal with online services deal with it is they use that as informational. They evaluate why it was revoked, whether it's a CV or whether it's an incorrect artifact, how that CV specifically affects them. There are multiple cases where CVs will not affect you based on the surface area of the library that you are consuming. And based on all of that, and then you plan and say, okay, I'm going to roll forward to a new version in future. So what I mean to say is the validation component of this, the notary validation component, when it returns a result, it can't just be a true or false, because that includes all of these sub conditions, which is integrity checks, publisher match, expiry, revocation. And that doesn't allow the consumer to put fine-grained policy around in which of these soft failures they want to continue. And I'm considering like signature expiry and revocation to be soft failures.
It's a good point. I think about it though when I think towards if we have an emission controller into the Kubernetes cluster, there's not going to be a person there looking at that output and making a decision based on that output. And so it's the emission controller just has to decide, is it admitted or is it not at that point in the Kubernetes cluster. So there, depending on what tooling is running this container, you're going to have different abilities to present that level. And so going through my head, I feel like that might be more, there needs to be an ability to attach a policy. And so there are going to be conditions like you're saying, you might want to say, let this go past X number of days on the expired certificate or something like that. But I think the result of checking through that whole policy and those fuzzy areas should still be a true false at the end of the day.
So my view is some of these, there are policies external to Notary, and there are policies that customer defines internal to the Notary, which is like defining the trust roots. These are where the signatures come from. Maybe being able to associate them with specific repositories or whatever is the identity of an image. And additionally, being able to define certain switches that influence how the verification works. And part of it, again, this is how I think about it, is being able to say whether expiry and revocations are treated as hard or soft failures. And again, like when we got into the details of revocation, we may end up relying on a out-of-band mechanism like CRL or OCSP. And you can have failures there due to unavailability, etc. So it's not even concrete information that something got revoked. The revocation status is unknown because you couldn't fetch it. And I feel certain of these criteria and ability for customers to define what happens in those conditions should be baked in part of the framework. And like external to it is where I see if customer defined metadata in the signature saying it passed unit test, integration test, or QC, and then I put specific conditions in my, I don't know, OPA or any other policy language. That is where customer defined policy fits in.
So there's a bunch going on there that I feel like it was getting bigger than just the revoking a signature. I'm wondering if it makes sense to capture that whole idea as a separate scenario.
Yeah, I think what you said is correct. Like there's a lot under revocation that cannot be captured here as a single scenario. What I was proposing be captured as a minimum, that it's not a hard error by default and the customer can influence the outcome. I think we can still debate how they influence the outcome is baked inside Notary or not. I think that's part of the design. But just the scope of this particular scenario, being able to call out both those scenarios where it can either be a hard failure or a soft failure based on how customers want to consume that error consume that condition.
Yeah, the direction I'm leaning is to soften this up a little bit, to not be so specific on exactly what's going to happen, but just to say that, hey, there is a revoked signature detected,
Yeah,
and then leave that undefined as what happens from there, but then capture your thoughts on there needs to be more than just a true false as a separate scenario, and then let us iterate on that separately.
yeah, I think, yeah, that sounds good. So one is like discovering the revocation status of an artifact, and maybe another around how consumers can control or how they can influence verification.
I kind of think there's very little difference in the way I think about it, and I think is also safer to implement is to have a policy that has tunables and then an engine that returns an explicit true or false, but whether you do it that way or whether you have an intermediate that gives you 20 booleans and then you have a policy that gives you true or false, the outcome is the same at the end, that we are just talking about APIs, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning that direction, but I think that might just be getting beyond the scope of what we're trying to do on just this one scenario. But I think there are two options there we want to debate.
Yeah, I think in the scenarios, if we are just able to paint an outline, and I think that's what we are attempting to do here, without making any hard decisions, and I think we can debate out. I think we can define the umbrella of what is possible here and define in detail out the specifics in design.
Yeah. All right. So my action on this one, I'll go take this and soften up some of the, what the implication is of one of these things being done. It's just not being so definite on how that's defined. And then can I task you, Milind, on open up a new scenario for your thoughts?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Yeah, just to add one point, what I'm getting here is the response is still true or false. But if it is false, it should be given additional information as to why it is false, so that whatever decision we make on the false, whether to block or whether based on the policy we make, whether we block or not, that is what I'm getting here. Is that true, Milind? The verification will be still a binary thing, but it should provide additional information as to false, like if the integrity has failed, or as you said, the signature has been expired or whatnot.
Yeah, again, we can detail out in the design. My view is the notary verification component does give you a true or false, but is influenced by our trust store or trust roots plus a trust policy, which says in these specific conditions, like expiry or revocation, how does it want the verification to proceed? Conditions like integrity check, fail, format, mismatch, mismatching, publisher, all of those are automatic hard failures. Customers don't have a say in that. But these are some of the conditions which customers do have a say.
Okay, makes sense.
I want to make sure I give everybody a second before jumping to the next one. No more thoughts on that one? Because the other one we had, Marina pulled yours on in here. And I don't know if there's much discussion on this. I haven't looked or gotten notified on it since it's not mine, but I just want to bring this one back up. And I know since Steve's not here, this might be a moot point, but since we've gone through a lot of work getting this thing updated and tweaked and adjusted, I just wanted to see if there were people that want to hit approve on this or not.
Yeah, I went through and kind of reopened this one, resolved some of the issues, solved the DCO. But there's no I don't think there's anything really new. It's just stuff we've talked about in the past. So it would be great if we could get this merged in just so we can iterate from there. But yeah, let me know if there's any other questions here.
Yeah, I didn't have any comments after I last reviewed and you replied to those comments. I think Steve made some comments after that, and I think you have responded or updated to those two.
Yeah, I think I made some updates, some comments. But
Yeah, and my goal will be just get some of these things merged, and then we can iterate from there, because it's like we were discussing earlier, it's hard to iterate on a PR.
Yeah, I'm waiting as well on this to get into that, to merge my content. That's gonna be a fun process.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to get this in there so that we can do, we've got a lot of stuff sitting out in a HackMD right now, and I'd like to try to get all this stuff in one place if we can. All right, that was it on my items here. Could be a short meeting unless anybody else has some topics they want to bring up.
Were there any other, I didn't go through the PRs or check anything, any other PRs that needed attention?
I think on my end, it's a lot. There's other ones that are that I have open still, but we've basically talked about the current state of them. They're just waiting for the process to be figured out. So
Yeah, and I've got at least one sitting out there where I haven't bothered updating it just because I know that we're still figuring out the process of getting things merged.
Okay.
all right. So is there anything else that people should read? Is there anything else to read during the week or anything like that, or just figure this out? Oh, by the way, I opened an issue. I'll add a link to it about the governance thing.
Add my thumbs up to that issue.
Yeah, I'll get working on that issue now. I see it. Thanks, Marina. Just add it to the notes too.
All right. Well, with that, unless anybody else has anything else, give back 30 minutes of the day.
Excellent. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.